And my tight end is a little different. He has some of the same bits about him and just kind of background. So previously he was getting passes from Jared Goff. The underrated tight end we previously mentioned, TJ Hockenson, is now getting passes from Goff. And Tyler Higbee is now going to be getting passes from Matt Stafford. And Gerald Everett is no more on the Rams. He's on the Seahawks now. So that opens up a lot of snaps. I think that opens up a lot of yards, catches, and potentially touchdowns for him. So I really do think he is one of the more underrated tight ends. He's had glimpses and stretches of being just like brilliant, like absolutely great for 4 or 5 games where he'll dominate. And you're like, when you compare this 6-week stretch of his to anyone else, like you put him in the top 5 conversation when you stack up the statistics. I wouldn't say he's a top 5 tight end by any stretch, but he has performed at that level from time to time. And really solid pass catcher, pretty decent at route running, really fast after he gets the ball, which I think is underrated for him. And I really do think he'll have an expanded role with Stafford. Stafford targeted Hockenson a lot. Now, they didn't really have any other great receivers, but it shows that he will go there. And Higbee is solid when given the chance. And I think Everett leaving is kind of the main thing that I think will help him be propelled a little bit more into the spotlight, and the fact that Everett was taking some catches and just snaps overall from him, but Higbee should be assuming the majority of those snaps. So I think he's due for a better year, and he'll have a better quarterback as well.
So I agree with you that Higbee is underrated, but I actually disagree with some of the reasons actually in terms of him having a bigger year next year. So I agree he's underrated from the sense that he's another all-around tight end. He's a good blocker and he's a good pass catcher, and he does both of those things at a pretty high level. And like you said, there's stretches where he can be the best offensive weapon on their team, and their team has Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. I mean, there were games last year where Tyler Higbee was their go-to wide receiver, and he played really well, and he responded and was their go-to receiver, and he's pretty consistent in all areas of the field. And like you mentioned, he is good after the catch and fast after the catch. The reason I disagree is, one, though, in regards to Stafford, they did have Golladay and Marvin Jones, and they still went to, and like you said, they still went to Hockenson. So, right, that translates. But the reason I'm going to push back, right, because everything from that standpoint makes sense, right? You have Kupp and Woods, but he's still going to go to Higbee. And their offense does get a lot of schemed up throws to Higbee, too. A lot of their bootleg shorter throws are for Tyler Higbee. It's because of Jacob Harris. And we did a video about Jacob Harris earlier, and he's kind of the new camp, the guy that was getting buzz from the Rams camp. So I'm going to put my stock into that. A guy with a composite athletic score of 9.88, a higher composite athletic score than Kyle Pitts. I think that Tyler Higbee is going to remain playing his same role for the Rams, because I think Jacob Harris is going to emerge in that Gerald Everett kind of tight end too, as their explosive weapon down the field and all of that. I think Higbee is going to remain having 50 catches, 650 yards, maybe 4 to 5 touchdowns. I think I agree with that. I just don't know if he will expand on that. But to be fair, I do think he's underrated because he's not even looked at as a guy who you can get 50 catches, 700 yards, and 5 touchdowns from. That to me is a legitimate tight end one. But Tyler Higbee is really just looked at, I mean, as a guy that's like a backup level tight end, a replacement level tight end. I don't think people have realized the improvements that he's made over the last 4 years. But I think Jacob Harris is going to ensure that Tyler Higbee remains at his consistent role, and he doesn't increase the amount of production that he has.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point too. Like, Jacob Harris definitely could, and he has been kind of the, sensation of training camp, even on a national level. Like, multiple, not just Rams fans know about him, but it's covered a lot. How spectacular he has been. So, we'll see. It's just being the tight end position, like, rookie tight ends usually have a tough time translating.
That's fair.
He has been as dominant as he has. Maybe I am underrating him and not taking into effect that he could do what Gerald Everett does and maybe even better. So we'll see. But I think there's one point that needs to be made, and this is just so true, Brandon Vincent. The Rams have so many mouths to feed. I wouldn't say it's the most in the league, but they have, I'd say, at least 4 or 5 receivers / tight ends that are legitimately deserving of getting a lot of passes thrown their way. So we'll see what they do. But yeah, that's Tyler Higbee. So just to wrap it up, I had Tyler Higbee as my most underrated tight end. Vish had TJ Hawkinson. His was more underappreciated because I think most people acknowledge that he is really good, but how good is more so